So we want to take, we've carved out about an hour's worth of discussion, give or take, and some room for questions throughout the presentation. So we want this to be as informative and informational as possible. With me today I have Eric Moore, Strategic Alliance Manager from Avalara, who will be able to introduce themselves and tee up the rest of our conversation this afternoon. But want to first set a few housekeeping rules. As with all algorithm webinar series events, this is being recorded. So if you or folks at your organization were unable to participate and you would like to have a link with which you can use to share to other folks at your organization, this will be made available at the end. That's one point of discussion. Second, we will be providing a survey. There's a brief 2 or 3 question survey at the end of this presentation today. So if you have specific feedback about the material shared or things you would like to see from the algorithm webinar series, we would love that feedback. We use that just to try and improve our programming and make these events all around more awesome. So we would greatly appreciate that. And then lastly, all participants just at the outset are muted. We've usually had some issues with crosstalk or information related to sounds, ambient noise in the background. So we try and mute folks at the outset to make sure that there's clear information being shared and there's no issue with respect to sound. So at the end, we may unmute folks to ask questions, but please do feel free to use the chat boxes and the question and answer panels within your WebEx screen to solicit questions through to us, and then we can pass those on to the host. One person I was recently speaking to about Avalara said, "You mean the people in orange?" So Avalara is much more than just folks who wear orange or who are orange-blooded by nature. They have a whole suite of applications that we've talked about over times past, and if you're familiar at all with algorithm, you know that we're closely linked with Avalara in terms of how we engage with our customers. So kind of leaving that up to kind of a high-level overview, we're going to talk with Eric more through some of the things or some of the action items that he's brought today that are interesting and specific to what he is seeing and conversations he's having. So Eric, can you hear me okay?
I sure can. Can you guys hear me?
We can, yes.
Awesome.
You sound great.
Great. Well, I first off want to thank Algorithm, Carl, Jeff, Mike, Alex, and the entire Algorithm team for allowing me to present this to your client base. I'm really excited about this.
Hey, Eric, real quick before you begin, we have one participant saying they're having some trouble hearing. Is there a way you may be able to up your volume? Let's see if that helped it. Is that any better?
Is that better?
That does sound better.
Okay. I will. I have the mic held up to my mouth, so I'll do that.
He's a master of ceremonies.
Awesome. Good afternoon for the people on the East Coast Central. Good morning for the people on the West Coast. So just wanted to introduce myself. I am Eric Moore, yes, the Strategic Alliance Manager at Avalara. And my role predominantly at Avalara is to work with the algorithms and as well as Macola and just really work as a liaison, anything and everything to do with the partnership. So from development to sales to doing webinars like this, and to help facilitate any questions that you may have, and I can do my best to if I don't have the answer. And again, I am not a CPA, and I cannot give tax advice because I don't want to be held liable, and nor do you want me to give you tax advice because I don't have a lot of experience in it. But I do know enough to help facilitate and answer some basic questions. But then also I do have several individuals behind me, so to speak, in a virtual sense in my corporation that can help answer any specific questions. And then if anybody is interested, by all means, reach out to me after this webinar, and I can point you in the right direction to get in front of a sales engineer as well as a partner sales representative, and his name is Nick Bocher. If you haven't met him at Evolve, I can definitely make that introduction. But our sales engineers are equipped. A lot of them are ex-auditors as well as CPAs as well. So they do come with tax knowledge as well as technology and a great personality, so as some would say. So a little bit, I'll start a little bit about Avalara. I'm not going to talk too much about Avalara, but the things of interest and areas of interest with Avalara. We have about, what sets us apart from a lot of individual organizations or companies, integrations that work within sales taxes. We have over 650 pre-built integrations. And what I mean by pre-built integrations, that's the middleware that actually communicates the Macola integration with Avalara. And so that is passing that information back and forth at an extremely fast pace, which is about 0.5 of a second is what it takes for a transaction rate to come through. So you don't really see any lag time, or you won't see any delay in your order process when you're looking for that calculation or setting up that client for exemption certificates. And the other area which a lot of the manufacturers and distributors deal with, management of exemption certificates. We manage over 25 up to about 30 million now exemption certificates last year. So here's a fun fact. With Avalara during Cyber Monday, I was told that we had 1 million transactions go through per minute without any delay. So that to me is just fascinating. And Cyber Monday is pretty crazy, and we saw no delay, and nothing broke. So that was exciting to hear. Today, I just want to talk a little bit why it's important to automate versus doing or providing and understanding and managing the exemption certificates or managing your sales tax compliancy, why it's important to automate versus doing it manual, and kind of the risks when you do it manually. And then talk a little bit about exposure. And what I mean by exposure, you may have heard the term Nexus or obligation. You have an obligation to remit and file a return in a specific state. And I'll talk a little bit about certificate management and a little bit about our product called CertCapture, which completely automates that entire process. And anytime I talk to a manufacturer, I've been to Evolve a couple times now, and I've been to several other manufacturing conferences, and the first thing I look at is people's eyes when I ask them this question. You know, walk me through your process of managing exemption certificate and how difficult is it? What are some of your difficulties? And they just like, their eyes roll, they get, I call it the bug eye, where, wow, this is, it's really, really bad. Because I oftentimes, when I talk to manufacturers, they say the simple thing, I don't have a sales tax issue. And I look at them, I go, I agree, you don't have a sales tax issue, but do you have an exemption or a reseller certificate management challenge? And that changes the whole conversation. And I'll show a little video by Bird Dog and of how to configure and how Avatax operates within the Macola ecosystem, as well as a brief overview of CertCapture, and just give you an idea of what it looks like and what it can do. And then, as Carl said, I will be open to any questions. And then if there's something I can't answer, I will definitely grab the information needed, and I will do my best to get that information to you. So, oops, sorry, hit the wrong button there.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, there we go. So why should you automate would be, is a good question, or why should you care in the U.S.? Because 50% or near 50% of the revenue that is generated by the state is generated by sales tax, which surprised me when I was first hired by Avalara, because that question was asked when I was in training, and I'm like, well, it's got to be personal tax, property tax, or other taxes, and they're like, no, it's sales tax. 47%, and it's most of it. If you were to take one thing, that's majority of where the revenue is made. But then if you look at that little box below this slide, they're losing $24 billion in uncollected tax. And this was about, I want to say this was about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And if you could just imagine how much internet sales has grown in the last 3 years, I'm sure 24 billion is more than that now. And so if states are so concerned about losing money, what do you think they're doing? They're hiring more auditors. And so all that does is puts more risk. Every year that goes by, it puts even more risk to the business owners to make sure that you're falling within compliancy. And to kind of piggyback what I just said, you got the Wayfarers versus South Dakota. This is a Supreme Court case that. So I'm going to step back in 1992. There was the same or very similar Supreme Court hearing that Quill Corp versus North Dakota wanted to impose sales tax on businesses that were lacking a physical presence, and they were referring to brick and mortar. But then when you think of lacking physical presence, let's talk and let's fast forward to now. We're talking about internet sales. We're talking about the Amazons. We're talking about businesses that are now selling online. Now we're fast forwarding to Wayfair versus South Dakota. In January, the Supreme Court, which surprised everybody, decided to take this case. And the rumors are that they're looking to have a result on that Supreme Court hearing in around June, July. And so essentially what that means to a business is if the Supreme Court takes this case and says, yes, we're going to impose sales tax to businesses lacking physical presence, that means now the sales that were done online that we're not collecting sales tax, or kind of that gray area, now will be required to calculate sales tax. And from Avalara's perspective, we don't have really a stance on either way, but I can tell you, just if you think of it logically, if it does pass, then everyone's going to have to collect sales tax. But then if it doesn't pass, it's still going to be a very, very complex issue, because then it's going to be held to the state level. And as a business owner, and if you're doing business, you're going to have to do your research to understand which states are now expanding that nexus. So either way, it's going to be a very difficult situation, and Avalara within the engine monitors and manages and maintains all the different rules, regulations, jurisdictions, Nexus, et cetera, all within that engine, and it's all done automated. And we have a team of over 100 previous auditors and other professionals that are constantly monitoring this, and we manage this, and every month we're looking and making changes. And then on top of it, if you're an Avalara subscriber, we notify you on the changes. So you are notified within any change within a jurisdiction or a product, et cetera, et cetera. So most businesses would say 75%. This is just kind of a study that was done by Wakefield Research. It's this in the tax world. It's the Aberdeen Research. They did this survey with businesses and CPAs, and well, with the businesses, they asked how many would think that they would be compliant if an auditor were to walk into their office. And 75% felt like they would find a mistake, and so that. And the interesting thing, what they found out, they were surveying some of the accountants, and they asked the auditors this, or the CPAs the same thing, and they 90%, I think, said that they were confident that they achieved all that needed for an audit, and I think 60% failed. So it's just to show you the complexity of an audit, what these auditors are looking for, and all they need is one little crack, one little chink in the armor, one little missing exemption certificate. If you're not calculating the right rate, if you're not calculating the right jurisdiction, et cetera, that's all they need to open up that for an audit, and that can cost you tens of thousands, 100, depending on the size of the business, could be into the millions. I've seen some businesses get hit over millions of dollars. So Carl, I'd like to stop right there to see if anyone has any questions, because I did talk a lot about some interesting things. Is there any questions in the chat box, or does anybody have any questions?
I think we're pretty good right now. There was one related to something that was you had mentioned about subscriptions, or if you're a subscriber, and related to that information shared about the Wayfarer versus South Dakota Supreme Court case. Is your product going to be, depending upon the decisions of that case, is your product going to be automatically updated to essentially assume those new standards or new regulations, or how does that work?
We're always looking. Anytime there's a change of any sort, we're always making changes. So my guess would be, well, not guess, it would be yes. I mean, because that's kind of we're continuously monitoring this, and we are monitoring this Supreme Court hearing. But again, we're not taking a stance either way. I have to. It's funny. I have to say that where Avalara doesn't take a stance whether we think it's going to happen or it's not. So because this is recorded, I want to make sure I say that.
Yes, so understood. But that was it. That was I thought that was pretty astute based on kind of those changes coming down the pike.
Very, very good question. So moving on to a lot of the challenges with Nexus. So Nexus is described as substantial physical presence, and most businesses that I have spoken to in my 3.5 years at Avalara have basically believed it's brick and mortar or having remote reps in specific states. And once that happens, then they feel like they have Nexus or an obligation to pay sales tax. But the reality is, in some states, there are some services are exempt, in other states, services are not exempt. Some of them, if you have 1099 employees, independent contractors, some states that you're not obligated, and in other states you are. And then you have different manufacturer reps. And then I've even heard there's a couple states where if you're advertising your banner into someone else's website that is headquartered in certain states, that could create Nexus. You go to a trade show, that can create Nexus. You go to a trade show and you have to have a transaction performed, that creates Nexus. So there's, and I don't know all the states, and if I do get questions for that, I really couldn't answer that. But again, when it comes to Nexus and jurisdictional rules, that shows the complexity. And then I'm going to kind of hop off here, and hopefully this shows up here. And let me know. Do you see this, Carl?
Yeah, that's the looks like a link to a blog post.
So there's a Nexus. Now they're creating like new definitions of Nexus, like economic Nexus. And so states are now talking about if you exceed a certain amount of money in a retail business, whether that's internet or not, you create Nexus. So there's economic Nexus, and there's other forms of Nexus. But this is, I just wanted to bring this up right here just to show you the different states. And I'm going to have this slide deck for everybody so they can look at this if they want. And again, go to avalara.com. We're not just, like Carl said, all about orange. We're not all about the swag, the sunglasses and a tiki hut and all that other fun stuff. We like to educate our clientele. We like to educate individuals on the different changes. And these are some of the states. So again, this is just another form of information and education that we can provide for you. I think I lost my spot right there, and here we go. And so essentially the tip of the iceberg is the calculation of sales tax. But in order for you, and I think there's just, when you peel back the onion or you go below the iceberg, as you can see on here, the first thing you want to identify as a business is where am I obligated? And so Avalara has what's called a Nexus study, or we have a team that provides a Nexus study, and that is roughly about $4,500 to where we'll look at all 50 states and look at your business, look at your products, your destinations, where you ship, where you distribute, et cetera, and we can help identify where you need and where you have obligation to collect. And as a manufacturer, the first thing that I've noticed is the management of exemption certificates is a key. So that is the certificate that tells the auditor or that gives you the permission not to collect sales tax. So if you're collecting sales tax, your sales tax on your invoice is your ticket, to the auditor, say, hey, I'm collecting sales tax because that's what I'm supposed to do. But if you have an exempt clientele, if you're going business to business, or if you're at that point, then you have to have that certificate to that business. So when you're talking about collecting sales tax, that's by invoice, and when you think of exemption certificate, that's by client or by customer, if that makes sense. And then if you go down the iceberg, you can see that e-commerce or more B2C, you would generally have more of an issue with collecting sales tax and filing returns, and it's more about submitting your sales tax. And in the end, you ultimately put your business in a position for an audit readiness and having all that sales and local tax all prepped and filed. And Avalara can automate that entire process. So if you kind of think of Avalara, I used to say, hey, we have 3 core products, but I've kind of changed my tune a little bit and say, if you are unsure where you need to be collecting or sending and remitting your sales tax, it's almost like you need a Nexus study with an exemption certificate and AvaTax with returns. And keep in mind, if you have very minimal sales tax challenges, we are scalable. So we have, you think of it as a tier level. So if you're only doing 500 transactions in a year, we have a tier level and a transaction level for that. And so again, like I said earlier, most of the clients that are manufacturing distributors that I work with, they always look at me and say, I don't have a sales tax issue. However, managing your exemption certificate, we say it's the same thing as money, because a missing certificate is going to, if you don't have that available and readily available for that auditor, that could cost you thousands of dollars within that audit. And then if you have that situation where you're in an audit, I've actually have a couple clients that are actually going through an audit right now, and just stress level that they're going through because of the time and effort to get the information for the auditor, and having an auditor on site at times, it's stressful, and basically at the end of the day, you're proving to that auditor, why you're not charging that sales tax. So what happens is if you're missing an exemption certificate, you have to go to that business. So the big question is, what if that business is out of business, or what if they filed bankruptcy, or what? It could be a litany of things, and you're not able to get that certificate. You just opened up the door for an auditor to now go and look a little bit deeper. And so there's a lot of challenges, and I hear a tremendous amount of challenges with a lot of the clients. They say it's difficult to collect them because in some cases they're reactively collecting them. The best thing is to automate it, obviously, and do it proactively. Because when you're waiting to the last minute to collect those, then it makes it a very, very difficult situation. And generally speaking, it's usually customer support or customer service teams or the sales teams trying to collect it. I used to work at my previous job, and we were required to get the exemption certificate or at least get an idea where the address was, and we had to come up with the sales tax rate. And as a sales rep, being a sales rep, it could have went to, I guess in the Hennepin County where I'm at in Minnesota, I could pick one of 3 tax rates. And of course, as a sales rep, I went with the lowest because it would have been a lower amount of money billed to my client, even though it wasn't the correct way. But what I'm trying to say is we're not trained to get the right rate if you're doing it manually. We're not trained what we need to look at in those exemption certificates. What happens in an exemption certificate if you have the wrong legal name, if you have the wrong address, if you received the certificate but yet you the company didn't sign it, those are voided to an auditor, and so then again you're back to going and retrieving that more on a reactive way. And then I've had some clients, they're like, oh well, we scan it and we electronically file those and we attach it to the customer. And the thing with PDF is you can't, it doesn't have intelligent information on the title of that file. So essentially, you don't know when this expiration date is or when that certificate's going to expire, because every state is different. Some you can have an exemption certificate and it's infinite, and in others it could be 5 years, and in some states you have to get a new certificate every year. And so the question is, where are your previous certificates? Did you store those? Because an auditor is not just looking for, hey, let me see your newest exemption certificate and make sure you have something on file. They're going to say, well, let me see your last 5 years exemption certificates. So hopefully you guys aren't cringing in and getting unsettled in your seats. But these are just, again, this is education. This is something that you should be thinking about when you're looking at managing your exemption certificates. And then when you have an auditor that comes into your business, it's about retrieval time. It's about having that hands-on with cert capture. You can have certificates and you can search within cert capture and have that ready for the auditor within minutes. And again, like I said, a single missing certificate or invalid certificate cost you thousands, possibly millions. And then moving to ABATAX, the filing calendars, they vary state by state, by particular business. Some states, they generally go monthly, quarterly, annually. And so when you're looking at filing, if you're in a year, if you're looking to file and you're doing it monthly, you got 12 returns. Avalara can file and remit those on your behalf. So it takes away that, and I've had a lot of people say that returns are very, very difficult as well, and they have to put an alarm on their computer and manually trigger to remind themselves to send that out. And so Avalara will automatically do that. So everything is done and we pull from an ACH fund. Avalara has the ability, because of the 650 plus connectors, not including all the API integrations we have out there, we can function within multiple billing systems at the same time. We call them multi-connector opportunities. So if you have an e-commerce store, if you're using like Shopify or something like that in Macola, we have the ability to pull from both, because some people want to get that front end tax information to the client and understand that at the front end. Some of the challenges that is when you get notices from specific states. With doing this and having it automated, again, you're taking that proactive approach, and so it's going to drastically reduce any kind of notices. Because I know that, in my personal business, my wife, she has a personal business, and we got notification. I'll tell you, every time I see IRS, I'm like, oh my goodness, and I'm like, my heart just starts pounding. Or the state of Minnesota Revenue Service, I cringed. Those notices will drastically drop because you are taking that proactive approach. And then the obvious time of spending on and I call it non-revenue generated activities. And so what this allows is individuals to do what they were hired to do, is to work, especially in finance, to kind of work on other projects rather than working on something that frankly, you go to any college in the United States, there is no degree for understanding sales tax. Like it's generally you learn on the job. It's a high risk, low reward position. And if there's an audit, and if you fail an audit, where is the company going to look at? They're going to look right at you, who is conducting all the information for the audit. And so just having that audit. So in the event of an audit, is just having that detailed data ready at your fingertips. That's the key. And then having the proof. Again, this is kind of a summary slide. to having that proof of the exemption of why you're not collecting sales tax. And then again, complying with each jurisdiction. And I guess this just warrants the time to talk a little bit about Colorado. If you're doing business in Colorado, the jurisdictions of Colorado are incredibly confusing. Literally, it's not zip plus 4. It's not even the same street. I was talking to Carl earlier today. Your next door neighbor, for whatever reason, and the way they created jurisdictions in Colorado, you can literally have a next door neighbor could have a completely different sales tax rate to yourself, and then 2 doors down they can have a different one. So there is no rhyme or reason. There is no system that Colorado has created to make this jurisdiction operate. It makes no sense. And so we manage and maintain all the changes when it comes to jurisdiction, product taxability, what's exempt, what isn't, and make that ready for your to have ready for your for an audit. And this I've even heard statistically in an audit, a mid-sized business is it's around $114,000 when you think of soft dollars, and also you have times, which is the time spent preparing and supporting. That's kind of like those soft dollars. But then you have the back tax payments of what what they feel and the auditor feels like you've missed. But then the big one is the penalties and interest. And so it's generally, I don't even want to give a number, but you generally owe a lot more than what you would have spent in the beginning. And so that's why I think what I'm trying to say is be more proactive, having something automated to where it's kind of like that thinkless integration that gives you that proactive approach to it gives you that peace of mind as a business owner or as finance director or someone that I deal with controllers and managers. It's just you're allowed, and it gives you that time to do what you were hired to do rather than chasing information for an auditor or being prepared for an audit. Carl, I'm going to stop there and see if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, there's one specific question about your integrations and your connectors. It's do you integrate with Logic Block? Is the question.
That's a good question. I personally haven't heard that one, but I could find out very, very quickly. Not right now, but I can log into my CRM, and I have a list that I can look up, and I will get that. We can get you that information today.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll make sure to take a note of this and who asked, and we'll get a response back over to you. Thank you.
You got it. So the way Avalara addresses these challenges, and again, this is going to be, some of this will be summary, is that Nexus study. We have the ability to identify where you have Nexus, but then it checks when you identify and understand where you have to collect, and when you set up AvaTax or even CertCapture, you're identifying where you need to be collecting, et cetera, or not collecting. And then at that point, the system and the integration runs that portion out. So it looks at where you're shipping. Is it exempt? Is it not exempt? What product are we dealing with? And then from there, it'll provide that tax or no tax. But then again, like I said, if you have CertCapture and that exemption certificate, you're storing that. So if you're not collecting, you have yourself covered there. And then automating the certificate management, and I'll get a little bit more involved with giving you an understanding of the CertCapture and certificate management when it comes to Avalara. And then the B2C is really the AvaTax is calculating that sales tax on a transaction level. And then the reporting, I was talking to Carl earlier about how our reporting takes everything at such a granular level from AvaTax. You can go into the console to pull up one invoice, to pull up one product, it'll break down every area from a municipal tax to an agricultural tax, transportation tax, stadium tax. It just depends on where it's at. And so it puts it you have the ability to identify what made that sales tax on that invoice. So it takes your reporting to a very, very granular level. And this is kind of, it's busy, but if you think of it as you have your system, you create a transaction. The first thing that your system wants to know, is this taxable or not? If it's not taxable, it's going to look at cert capture, or it's going to look at that customer, and if it's zero, then you're obviously going to get a zero tax. But if it comes back and says, no, this is a taxable product, this is a taxable client, it's going to go right to AvaTax, and it's going to look at the jurisdiction, the product, and bring back to your system within 0.5 of a second. All that happens. I mean, it's funny when you say this. Look how busy this is, and this happens within on the first two, the cert capture and AvaTax. That all happens within 0.5 of a second. So a fraction of a second, you're getting a lot of information there and providing that sales tax rate. And then from there, once we identify where those certain states that you have Nexus in, from a return standpoint, we look at on a monthly level, quarterly, et cetera, et cetera. You would indicate when and how often and the frequency that you have to file a return. And then from there, it'll pull all that data from AvaTax into the returns, and we'll file and remit those on your behalf. And so essentially it's hands off. So once you set this up, you really don't touch it, other than monitoring and making sure that everything is it's more of observation rather than doing any kind of work. And I get a lot of questions on implementation. Implementation takes 30 to 60 days, and it really depends on how many certificates, because in some cases it could be more. It just depends on how many certificates, how many transactions you're doing, and how many products that you're selling and services. But essentially, we generally use BirdDog is a third-party developing company that developed the connector that we promote at Avalara. It's a very, very good product because Robin Zurz is the CEO and developer and owner of BirdDog, and I work side by side with him and explain to him, this is what I would like this connector to function. And we're finding that a lot of the businesses now are looking to go international. So Robin has opened up the ability to operate in calculating VAT and global tax. And if you are doing international sales, it operates a little bit differently than what we would do in the States. If you're doing business B2C, it's pretty seamless. It's pretty, there's not many limitations. But when you're going business to business, there's certain aspects of doing business to business internationally that we may have some limitations on the AvaTax side. So if you are doing international sales and you're interested in Avalara, we would definitely point you in the direction of Nick Bocher, our PSM, as well as one of our sales engineers, to get a deep dive to understand how you're handling international, so we can make sure that we're functioning the way that you want and have that expectation. And it also, the new product, and we're on the finishing and the end stages of integrating cert capture within Macola. So essentially what you do now is cert capture operates as a standalone product where you will take your client base in a CSV file and upload it into cert capture. What Robin is doing is integrating the two together with his connector, which is going to allow us to, or you as a client, to push that data directly to cert capture, and you won't have to operate through two systems, and so everything will work through Macola. But obviously, if in the event of an audit, you would operate through cert capture, because that's where your reporting is going to be. But just so you know, that the BirdDog connector we're looking at it to be fully functional, and there's very few connectors that are fully functional at Avalara. Not a lot of connectors are integrating within CertCapture, but I've really put a push on this because of the manufacturers that we deal with, that's a big deal. And so I want to make this as seamless and tightly integrated as possible for you to make it easier to function and work. So I understand, you know, manufacturers, and I understand where some of the pain points are, and I've heard enough from manufacturers to really push this. And Robin heard, and I'm really excited about this. And so I also asked Robin to and Jeremy Mowbray, who is the VP of Sales, to create a demo to create a YouTube video to show how, because we talked about how easy it is to configure from an integration standpoint. And so there's two parts to the support. One, you got the Bird Dog, which is going to help you with the technological integration setup, but then you got Avalara, who's going to help you with the mapping of products, understand your products, and kind of set up in the Nexus and where you need and where you have obligation, and kind of work with you on how we can set that up on there. And we kind of work together in the back end to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. So I asked Jeremy to create a YouTube video to kind of show a little bit about how an individual configure, but then also show how it operates within the Macola ecosystem. So hopefully you guys can hear this. I was able, I did set this up to where I can play from here, and this will show you and give you an idea of how it operates and how easy it is to set up and operate within Macola. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a second here, and here we go.
When configuring software, set up the Avalara package in Dakota, and when you do this, make sure that you set the app percentage to 0. Shown there. You can also set up customer codes and exemptions, customer maintenance. You also support customer tax IDs, tax IDs for VAT registration, and tax service. For item maintenance, you can also enter tax service code there, as shown. Now let's talk about using the software. Step number 1, enter the sales order. Step number 2, if you process credit card transactions, authorize for the order and sales tax amount. Step number 3, print your order acknowledgement. You'll see that the order acknowledgement also shows the sales tax amount. Next step, select the orders for billing. If processing credit card, run the capture process. We're almost done. Step 6, print or email order. Again, when you print those, going to show the sales tax for that order and invoice. Step 7, post invoices. That's the last step of the process, and you're done. My name is Jeremy with Bird Dog Software. Thanks for checking out Bird Dog Sales Tax.
So that's how Avalara or Avatax operates within the Macola ecosystem. And I wanted to just kind of show you a little bit about Avalara's CertCapture. Carl, can you see this as well?
Yeah, I see that, the CertCapture portal there.
Yeah, so with CertCapture, the main page is going to show you a dashboard with widgets, and you can add widgets. And in my particular demo environment, I created where you can have a snapshot of expiring documents, customers, etc., and invalid customers. So if someone didn't fill it out correctly, that kind of gives you a snapshot of who you need to reach out to or send another email out saying, hey, this is incomplete. And if you're looking, so if an auditor, if you unfortunately get hit with an audit, you have the ability to, and they're looking for a particular customer, you can actually look at specific customers within seconds you can identify. So I say unfortunately you get an auditor that comes in your office or business, but I say fortunately because you have cert capture, because you're going to go in here and within seconds you're going to have access to that customer. And then if you have a new client and you want to manually input, you can actually add a customer yourself manually. You can import, like I said earlier, with a CSV file. And then if you wanted to create a campaign, you can create a campaign to reach out to expiring certificates. So you can run a list and say, I want to get access to and create a campaign of anyone who's expiring at the end of the year, and say in October I want to start this campaign and do it every month and send out a new a notification stating that if we do not receive you can create a cover letter and customize it and say, if we don't receive your certificate by December 31st, we are going to be forced to collect sales tax. And it's important that you do that, because then at that point you're liable. And so, and I will tell you, I get a lot of people who laugh who use cert capture. It's like, oh, you want to get your certificate January 1 or thereabouts after December 31st, when they start getting charged sales tax. You get people calling, why am I getting charged sales tax? And then they're like, well, because we've been asking you for your exemption certificate. And when you send this request, it's kind of neat. It's kind of like DocuSign, where you have, as a client, you're sending out that specific exemption certificate. It's not a universal certificate. It's the actual certificate for that state. So if that one client is in multiple states, you can send out multiple certificates, and cert capture will identify when that has to happen. And they have to fill out every form, and every form has to be filled out correctly, and it has to be signed. Otherwise, it won't take, or it won't allow that certificate to go through. And once they hit save, after everything's signed, and they sign with their mouse, so they have their signature, it goes to your cert capture account, and at that point you'll have that certificate ready and available at any time in case of an audit. Okay. Any questions so far after seeing the cert capture dashboard and doing a 50,000 foot level of cert capture, and as well as AvaTax? Any questions out there, Carl? Are we good?
Excuse me, sorry there. No, nothing right now. So if we have a little bit more to share, then as they come in, we can add to that last question on the logic block.
Great, absolutely. So pricing, AvaTax is we charge per invoice or per transaction, not per line item, but per transaction. And cert capture, the way Avalara bills, is per certificate. And returns are a number of returns. And as I said earlier, if you're doing, for an example, if you have Louisiana and you're having to do monthly certificates, that would be 12 certificates. And then with Louisiana, it's kind of interesting. That's why I kind of bring it up, is you got 52 parishes that need different returns by the specific parish. So Louisiana could be difficult when it comes to remitting and sending those returns to those specific parishes. So that one's, I have one client that I'm working with that's the biggest source of their headache is having to constantly sending out different returns because she's involved with 12 parishes. So if you can imagine monthly with 12 parishes, you know, just taking that off her plate is taking off pretty much a day and a half worth of work. And so that is it. This is my information. And if anyone has any questions, again, I'm gonna create a PDF slide deck for this, and I will send this to Alex and Carl as well as Jeff to send out to y'all. And if anyone has any questions, you can certainly reach out to me. If you're interested, I can definitely point you in the direction. You do have a dedicated partner sales manager. His name is Nick Bocher, and I am your dedicated strategic alliance manager. So you will be working with one or the other, but we work as a team, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can. And if anyone has any questions, even after we leave today, feel free to reach out to me. I can always forward some of your questions to some of our sales engineers, or if we feel we need to do a deeper dive understanding of your business, we can always set up a call with one of our sales engineers. And again, it's not a sale. Our discovery calls are not salesy. We don't try to push Avalara. What we try to do is educate and get a better and be educated to get a better understanding about your business. And so if it's a good fit and you're a good fit for us, then we're happy to help and facilitate. But if you feel like what you hear and you've got a good handle on your business, then we're fine with that, because ultimately we want to make sure that your business is covered and that you have all the tools you need to be successful in the event of an audit. So again, thank you. And Carl, if you have any questions.
Perfect. No, I think that was a great way to close, and you've always been a great partner with us, and we look forward to continuing to work with our customers to kind of evangelize the reasons why your solution is the right fit for folks. So we appreciate your time again, Eric. If people do have questions, just kind of a reminder of some of those items I broached at the beginning of the webinar. There will be a brief survey, less than 5 questions at the end of this, so that just helps your answers to that help us kind of control the programming and make better use of your time, as we know this is a lot to ask. So we're about 51 minutes into this. We'll give you that 8 minutes back to go and have for the rest of your day. But we really appreciate everybody's time and their participation today, and we will talk to everybody soon. Have a great week.
Thank you.